I'm Leona Sevick, and I'd like to thank Rebecca Aronson and the Badmouth Reading Series for inviting me to read. Happy 2021. I'm going to read a couple of poems from my book, Lion Brothers, and then I'll read a couple of poems from my new manuscript. The title of my book comes from the name of the sewing factory where my mother, an immigrant, worked for 25 years. And so I'll read the title poem, Lion Brothers. Sometimes they sent her home early, her hand bandaged tight where a needle had pierced her. Home from school, I found her curled on the floor, watching. She woke early to put on her face before we could see it for what it wasn't, round and smooth and yellow. Her legs tucked under her, she held the mirror in her tiny hand and painted on the jungle colors, blacks and blues. At the factory, she tied tools around her waist, slimmer than any boy's, though her arms were knotted in muscles. She climbed up beside the men, 4 feet above the ground on their vibrating monsters, machines that worked like animals. Pieces of thread cut from the loom and dropped clean, their words gathered around her feet. Chink. The title of this poem comes from a line from a very famous Yeats poem. I had pretty plumage once. The bees alighting on clover so near my toes have no interest in what I have to offer. Fat wolf spiders on my porch jump at flies and leave my arms, my legs unmolested. Unnamed snakes that could be copperheads, but probably aren't, have no business here. Their forked tongues and fist-shaped faces aimed at other prey. Deer ticks, clinging to thousands of tall blades, prefer to jump their perches for some piece of puppy ass, waving at the sky in happy oblivion. And even the darkening sky, with its strong, broad shoulders, seems interested in other things. I'd like to read another poem that recalls a film that some of you will remember. It has a couple of unforgettable scenes. On the anniversary of your infidelity. Moving around the bed, stepping with delicate feet on every uneven surface, he settles finally on a place behind my knees, curling into a tight, breathing ball. Soon he'll begin to snore, and on trips to the bathroom or to the dresser where we've placed glasses of water out of his reach, we will move gingerly, careful not to hurt him with our clumsy bodies. To think I once considered boiling him in a pot I used to make soup. Because you love him too, I thought I might just gather him up in my arms, let him lick my eyelids with his flypaper tongue, sniff his fertilizer smells one last time before dropping him into the boiling water and closing tight the lid. I got the idea from that film I saw on my very first date. The boy who took me, it turns out, was damaged too, and I wonder if he ever thinks back to the dark theater smelling of popcorn, his hand gently resting on my knee as we watched the girl find the empty rabbit cage just as Anne Archer opens the pot. I should have known you can't watch a thing like that and expect to live happily ever after. And the last poem I'll read from this collection is called White. And it was published on the Split This Rock website. You can find it there. White. Instead, I spotted our mother in a tiny chair in the back row, her blue-black head shining unnaturally. She was dressed in clothes she'd laid out in her mind the day before, when her hands were moving along spools of color, bright rainbow of threads flying through air as loud as a train. It cost her half a day's piecework to see her boy and girl outread them all. Her own English, bent and twisted still after all those years, carried whiffs of garlic and fish sauce. We hoped she would be silent. At home, where every night we waited for the rice to steam, her soft chatter lulled us to sleep. This next one is the title to my manuscript, my new manuscript. Steady Girl. They say the best ones stay forever, no matter how skittish, how wild-eyed and restless their stallmates, the horses they're meant to calm. Entering the pen, the goats draw out the twitching dark poison, work quietly to free mile after mile of glistening horsehide from the hard tug of fear and longing, the animal need to run in all directions at once, to be nowhere and to be everywhere in the world. See the short gait that never matches long strides, the strange rectangular pupils, bright sideways slits, soothing those hot beasts quivering with singular talents. When she leaves you, remember it's no one's fault. No love will ever hold her. No devotion will be nearly enough. My next poem was inspired by a trip to South Korea, my mother's homeland. And it takes place in a museum. Well, part of it does. Bamboo Wife. If one bright day you find yourself moving through the rooms of the Jeju Folklore Museum, you might pause at the domestic exhibits, wonder at the strange closed basket as wide as a drum and as long as a yardstick. They call it Bamboo Wife, and carefully printed signs tell you that in warmer months, men would wrap their arms and legs around her cage body to sleep. Her ribs free from flesh, the air moving through her to cool the sleeper. Perhaps you think this is a strange marriage, the wife stiff and silent, her spouse breathing into her the stale air of sleep, arms locked in a tight embrace around nothing. Where has she gone, living wife? Out to the paddy field in search of a soft breeze, the cold water cupping her feet as she reaches for the sky. Thanks to Southeast Review that published that poem. Some of you might be familiar with Provincetown. It's a wonderful community, and I've been there several times for poetry workshops. This poem is Dahls House, Provincetown Museum. Walk through the giant open jaws of the blue whale, back toward the stunned faces of the china-headed dolls wearing Victorian clothes and clutching real leather purses to find the house that's the size of a small gas stove. Set on a 3-foot platform so you can peer into its windows, point at its tiny fixtures and the books with real and separate pages. This house glows with a softened light that draws us closer. Pressing a cheek against the wooden siding, your nose to the windows, you'll discover thick plastic panels shielding its orifices and rebuffing our fingers, the pinchers and pads that long to probe everything. The hurricane lamp, half the size of a pinky, the lovingly quilted coverlet, the perfectly placed cup and saucer no one uses anymore. What dreadful thing has happened to this family? Some hard truth erupting among them on an otherwise quiet evening, driving them out, inviting the transparent barrier that makes it impossible to return. This next poem is forthcoming from Blackbird, and it's a poem about my father, who was a police officer. He's and has this interesting story about guarding one very famous person, one notorious person, guarding George Wallace. One May day in 1972, Arthur Bremer shot Wallace 5 times, a bullet lodging in his spine in such a way he'd never walk again. We know that Bremer was crazy, not a martyr for good. Here is madness where we crave reason, bald desire for fame where we'd prefer conviction. My father, 25 and gentle still, stood with his straight back to the door of Wallace's hospital room, gun at his hip and shoes polished to a high shine. He would have laid down his life for a man I've considered unworthy. Who among us chooses who we care for, who we serve? For my part, I have forgiven him nearly everything. I have just 2 more poems from the manuscript. And this poem also was inspired by my trip to South Korea, to Jeju Island in particular. Stone Grandfather, or Dol Harobang, Jeju Island, South Korea. And there you sit, your basalt belly swollen heavy, a gentle smile playing at your stone lips. To say I sought you out would be a bald-faced lie. But I will admit that seeing you standing there all alone on Hapje Beach, the long tide pulling at the sand around you, gave me pause. Towering, ominous, and amused, your gray, bulging eyes the diameter of cymbals, you waited patiently for me to speak, an outdoor priest in his open-air confessional. Beckoning with giant fingers, you intimated I should kneel at the idea of your feet. Tell me your troubles. When I was a child, my Korean grandmother urged me to pray to Haraboji, ask the grandfather for his forgiveness for every sin my child's heart harbored. I've since forgiven her this small cruelty. In this strange place, newlyweds buy their own harobangs. Mock believe you'll ensure fertility in their bright futures. Trust me when I say that's not what I'm after. I've had, in fact, lifetimes enough of all that. What I need can't be found in travel brochures or on the strangely worded plaques that appear with you on this honeymoon island. I need the old beliefs, the ones the fishermen and sailors clung to years ago. No matter what they had done or who they had injured, you looked at them with eyes that said, beloved, said, you are worthy of my love, of others' love. I can see you. And for my last poem, I'll read a very short sonnet. It's titled Untenable. Looking down from my second-story porch, I see the flowering quince they say will thrive in almost any soil. This one is no doubt dead, though its faithful branches reach up and outward, insulting the brittle, dry sticks that pin the massive bush to fertile ground. Watery red flowers, the color of diluted blood, once bloomed in winter on its bare and twisted branches. And in springtime, the dark leaves bore small, sharp teeth, so that I thought nothing in the natural world could kill it. But who am I to make such bold assumptions? Who knows for certain which ones must be nurtured? How fragile love. Thank you very much.